Vote counting begins in Venezuela after Sunday's governors and legislative elections. Russia and Ukraine completed an unprecedented exchange of prisoners Sunday after direct talks held by both nations. And in Palestine, the number of civilians killed after Israel resumed its genocide against Gaza has risen to almost 54,000. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Polls closed and vote counting is underway in Venezuela after the National Electoral Council had extended the voting time to allow people still in line to exercise the right to vote. Polling stations across the country were closed after millions of Venezuelans attended the voting centers in the communities to choose deputies to the National Assembly and regional legislative councils, as well as 24 governors, including that for Guyana Esequiba. The Vice President of Venezuela's Electoral Authority, Carlos Quintero, described the voting day as positive and reiterated the importance of the elections as an act of reinforced sovereignty for the country. In Venezuela, the leader of the campaign command for the Great Patriotic Poll, Jorge Rodriguez, offered statements following the mega elections held in the nation. In his remarks, Rodriguez thanked the Venezuelan people for taking part in the elections in a massive way and in a peaceful manner, especially at the Guyana Esequiba region. He underscored that they had no incidents in spite of the attempts and threats of the extreme right wing to undermine this democratic process. In this context, the chief of the Event 25 campaign reaffirmed that in Venezuela the peace won through the democratic vote. Also in this context, the Chief General of the Venezuelan Armed Forces, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, offered statements as the person in charge of the security operation during this legislative and governor's election. On behalf of the Bolivarian Armed Forces, he also thanked the people of Venezuela for exercising the right to vote in peace and assured the security and safety of the process was warranted. Earlier in the day, the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro cast his vote in the framework of the nation's regional and legislative elections. Accompanied by the nation's first combatant, Cilia Flores, they both took part in the election that will define the heads of all 24 states and the composition of the Legislative Assembly until the year 2031. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro announced at a press conference Sunday that he will put before the new National Assembly a constitutional reform proposal to create an electoral system for the communal circuits.
He hablado con la Comisión de Reforma de la Constitución, la Reforma Constitucional.
I have spoken with the Commission for Constitutional Reform, and we have agreed to prepare a longer, more inclusive, open and participatory consultation process to be delivered to the National Assembly in January for a new constitution reform. We are not going to give this task to this Assembly, but to the new one. Also, I'm entertaining an idea to perfect the electoral system. Is that right, Cilia? Cilia is an expert. Her son is here, and Jorge is an expert too. The Admiral-in-Chief is around here, the Governor of Caracas, the Mayor of Caracas, the head of the government. It is an idea that I'm submitting to the public debate. Venezuela needs to modernize, expand, and bring to reality the new political system it is building, as well as its electoral system. That is why I believe, and that is how I'm going to work on it and present it to the new National Assembly. The implementation of a new electoral system, the reform of all the electoral laws, and to create the electoral system of the communal circuits as a new system of consultation and election in Venezuela, the electoral system of the communal circuits.
sistema de consulta y elección de Venezuela, el sistema electoral de los circuitos comunales.
This May 25th elections are being held in Venezuela. In addition to renewing the Legislative Assembly, 24 governors will also be elected throughout the country. The world is attentive to the creation of a new state of Guyana Esequiba, from where our correspondent Bruno Falsi brings us the report.
A historical event is happening in Venezuela, the creation of the new state of Guyana Esequiba. In the city of Tumeremo, the capital of the new territory, there is a peaceful atmosphere, but also great expectation, as the people will elect their first governor and 7 representatives to the National Assembly.
Y bueno, aquí la lucha por nuestro Esequibo.
Well, here, in the struggle for our Esequibo, looking for the welfare of the community. For us, this date is important, the 24th, because it would help us develop economically, because we have potential. It is a resource here in the state of Bolivar of Esequibo.
For more than 200 years, Venezuela has been fighting for its territorial integrity. The population is mobilized and hopes that this election will finally unify the nation. This struggle dates back to the days of the liberator Simón Bolívar, when his troops fought and died on this soil.
We are free, thanks to the Lord, to God, because first of all we are not afraid of what is to come, because we still have life to fight for the Esequibo. Because the Esequibo will be ours now and always. Because we want to move forward with the Esequibo.
A region of natural beauty and mineral wealth, with a large indigenous population, the new state will bring development to the region, improving the living condition of its inhabitants by bringing the state closer to its citizens.
What we want as an indigenous community, I am part of it, a member of an indigenous community, that all the people who live around this area here be able to resolve everything united, with unity. If we are reclaiming something, we are reclaiming what is ours, that is, what belongs to us.
The Bolivarian government made a referendum held in 2023, where 95% approved the incorporation of Esequibo as a Venezuelan state. President Nicolás Maduro is determined to follow the will of the people and recover the country's historical rights, but using the international law and peaceful means. In the camera of Marcos da Silva, Bruno Falsi, Esequibo, Venezuela, for teleSUR.
And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Panama's indigenous ethnic groups asked Pope Leo XIV to intercede in the face of government repression in the country. Following a document signed by 7 indigenous ethnic groups, they asked the Supreme Pontiff to call on the Panamanian government to use dialogue as a way to solve the problems and the persecution in the demonstrations. The indigenous communities denounced the systematic violation of their fundamental rights by the government. It is evidenced in the repression against the demonstrators, as well as the criminalization of the protest, while teachers, university students, workers, indigenous people and the community in general demand the repeal of Law 462 that reformed the insurance fund. In Argentina, the government of Javier Milei orders a severe cut in the so-called Progresar scholarships intended to support young people in completing their studies. Since the beginning of Javier Milei's presidential term, the Argentine government has cut 500,000 beneficiaries of the Argentine Student Support Program scholarships, popularly known as Progresar, and reduced the projected budget for 2025 for the educational program, which also guarantees the completion of young people's studies and their professional training. For its part, the Argentine Center for Political Economy warned that the budget projection for 2025 suggests that there is a possibility that the government of Javier Milei will order further cuts in the number of beneficiaries of the scholarship program. In the Dominican Republic, the death toll from the Jet Set nightclub tragedy has risen after a young woman who had stayed 46 days in the intensive care unit died Saturday. Alba Montero, a 33-year-old woman, died Saturday afternoon in Santo Domingo after being hospitalized due to the serious injuries suffered in the collapse of the roof of the Jet Set discotheque on April 8th. Alba's death brings to 236 the number of fatalities in the third big tragedy in the history of the country, according to the official list of the authorities. In addition, the Dominican authorities announced an investigation into the tragedy, but have not yet reported the conclusions, while the national government acknowledged a legal vacuum in infrastructure regulation. Haitian authorities reported the restoration of electricity in the city of Port-au-Prince after protesters shut down their country's hydroelectric power plant. According to reports, the electric service will arrive in a gradual manner, so some communities are still without electricity. Haiti's hydroelectric power plant had been closed since May 11, 2025, as a protest against the generalized violence in the popular communities of the city of Port-au-Prince. The demonstrators also assured the government that if it does not comply with the legitimate demands of the population, the closure of the hydroelectric plant will be resumed. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. Russia and Ukraine completed an unprecedented exchange of prisoners Sunday after direct talks held by both nations in Turkey early this month. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, 303 Russian soldiers were returned from Kiev-controlled territory, while 303 Ukrainian prisoners of war were handed over by Moscow. All of the returned Russian soldiers and civilians will be transferred to Russia for treatment and rehabilitation in medical institutions of the Russian Defense Ministry. During the swap negotiations held in the Turkish city of Istanbul, both parties agreed on the largest prisoner exchange based on the so-called 1,000 for 1,000 formula. The number of Palestinian civilians killed after Israel resumed its genocide against Gaza has risen to almost 54,000. Health authorities reported that the death toll of at least 38 Palestinians and more than 204 wounded during the last 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. With these new figures, more than 3,700 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli attacks since the end of the truce in March, while over 10,000 have been wounded. The authorities have also denounced the continuous Israeli non-stop aggressions, despite the United Nations Security Council calls for an immediate ceasefire. The World Food Programme denounces the increase of malnutrition cases among Palestinian families in Gaza and warns of the need for daily humanitarian aid. The World Food Programme stresses that the flow of humanitarian aid to Gaza must be daily, without obstacles or restrictions, since the population is on the verge of starvation. This United Nations program pointed out through a communique that the situation for the Gazans has reached catastrophic levels since last March 2nd, when Israel closed all crossings to Gaza. Moreover, the World Food Programme stresses that it is necessary to allow them to be able to distribute the food and medical aid that enters the whole territory without impediments from the Israeli occupation forces. In Palestine, the number of deaths from hunger-related causes in the besieged Gaza Strip rises to 58 in the last 24 hours following the death of a 4-year-old child. Doctors at Al-Ali Baptist Hospital confirmed the death of Mohammed Mustafa Yassin, attributing it to prolonged malnutrition amid the ongoing Israeli blockade and the deliberate policy of starvation imposed on the enclave. Medical reports indicate that in addition to the 58 confirmed deaths related to malnutrition, another 242 people, mostly elderly and children, have died in the last 80 days due to the lack of access to food and medicine. The Israeli siege, which began to intensify on March 2nd, has pushed the 2.4 million inhabitants into a state of famine as aid convoys remain blocked at cross-border crossings, unable to enter, and Israeli military attacks spread across the north and south of the Strip. International human rights organizations warn that in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, close to 30 million people live with extreme food insecurity. According to data issued by the World Food Programme, the provinces of Ituri, North Kivu, South Kivu, and Tanganyika have greater difficulties in accessing food. It is due to the armed conflict that plagues the nation. At the beginning of 2025, the food crisis increased from 6.6 million to 7.9 million people because of the insecurity in trade routes, cultivation areas, the limitations to access markets added to the increase in food prices. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.